Good morning, everybody. Is this not too loud? Yes? It's loud for me, so. Good morning. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me, Gino and Kevin. I actually studied bioengineering at this university. It feels like a long time ago now. It was called agricultural engineering in those days, and only later on did I move to economics. I worked mostly on agricultural policy and food, economic and policy issues, and it's very actual today. If you try to drive into Brussels, I would recommend you not going there with the farmers' demonstration. In 2009, we organized the first Economics of Beer International Conference here in Leuven. So the book which you show, which was published by Oxford University Press, is kind of an outcome of the conference. It was published 2 years later. And we're actually having this week in Seattle our 4th international conference, and I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of my talk. Okay, so the title may sound a bit strange, 18 Things to Know About the Economics of Beer and the Business History of Brewing. It's actually based on a talk for TED, TED, you know these talks you see on YouTube, which I gave last year, and they gave me 18 minutes. And so I basically said, okay, I'm going to say 18 things, one for each minute. And I kind of liked the approach, so I kept the title, and it's an updated version. So I better get going, because I only have 20 minutes. The first point is that beer is globally the most consumed alcoholic drink. Now I'm gone, I guess. Hello? Yes, I'm back. So this is data for the last 50 years. This is from 1960 till 2010, roughly. And the blue line is beer. This is in volume, and this is in value terms. And you see that by volume, it's by far the largest alcoholic drink, and by value, it's roughly twice as much worth, if you want, in economic terms as wine, and that has stayed relatively constant. You see also that the other alcoholic drinks, which is like whiskey, vodka, etc., it's been stabilizing since the 1990s, really. Now, I told you about the history. I'm going to go back very briefly, very long time ago, but many of you know all this already. So beer goes back to 7,000 years. China, Egypt, Europe, all around the world. What's interesting, if you look at Europe now, and if you look at Europe, you see that the spread of wine, okay, in large parts of Europe, like think about France and Spain, etc., also North Africa, really came with the expansion of first the Greek, but particularly the Roman Empire, which really brought viticulture to a large part of Europe, which before was just consuming beer. Now, not everybody liked them, or liked the wine. And this is a fantastic quote from Julius Caesar's book, De Bello Gallico. So as many of you know, Julius Caesar was the Roman emperor who came here with his army trying to conquer the regions. What you may not know is that actually the financing of that army, of the Julius Caesar's coming here, was actually financed by Roman basically owners of vineyards who were looking to expand their markets for wine. But as this quote says, the Belgians and the Germans really didn't like them, because that wine causes that the mind is enervated, the courage is impaired, men degenerate and are rendered effeminate, they become women by that commodity. So you should stick to beer already then. Then, I see there's going to be a talk later about taxation. Historically, beer has been really important from a government budget perspective. In this part of the world, the Low Countries, which is roughly Belgium and the Netherlands now, in the towns, a town like Leuven, for example, 50 to 90% of their revenue, of their budget revenue of these towns, came from beer taxes in 14th till the 17th century. So it was really, really important source of government revenue. There's a fantastic book by an economic historian. His name is John Nye, and he writes, the book is called War, Wine and Taxes, and he argues essentially that most of the expansion of the British Empire is actually financed by beer taxes in the 18th century. So it's an incredible story of how important these taxes can be for government finance and even for military occupations around the world. As you undoubtedly know, the hops revolution is basically often tell this story to people who don't know much about beer. It's like, oh, there's been two major revolutions in beer, and they were kind of scientific revolution or technical revolution, but they implied revolutions in how the beer industry was organized and how brewing was taking place and the market evolved. The first one is the introduction of hops. Of course, you know what hops do. I don't have to explain you that. But it's not just, the discovery or the introduction basically transformed the entire beer industry in this part of the world and later everywhere in the world, right? What's very remarkable is that it took roughly 500 years, okay? This is a long time. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of years for actually these things to spread in regions where there was a lot of beer production, like in England, for example, and in the Low Countries. And the reason was political. The reason was because governments were getting a lot of tax revenue from selling gruut, the spice, the mix of herbs and spices, to basically whoever, all the households which are producing beer. And basically, with the arrival of hops, these households did not need that anymore, and so basically they did not want to purchase these herb mixes anymore from the governments, and this undermined the tax base of these rulers, the local and the more regional rulers, and for that reason, essentially, they forbid it. And it's only with the immersion of commercial brewing, so you move from household brewing and monastery brewing to commercial brewing, that now these governments can tax the commercial brewers, and then they allowed it, okay? So the development of commercial brewers goes together with the introduction of hops, not just for technical reasons, but also for political reasons. Sorry. Then the next revolution, if you want, is, and I'm sure all of you know that much better than I do, is the scientific and the industrial revolution, where you have the discovery of yeast, steam engine, refrigerators, glass bottles, and this transforms, the nature of the beer that we consume. Now, what's important from an economic perspective is that also allows production at an industrial scale, and again, this totally transforms the beer market and the brewery industry. And for this, we actually have reasonably good data. So this is, over the last 150 years, the number of breweries in Belgium. So this is 1850, and this is roughly until now. And you see that up till, am I getting the pointer here? Okay, well, I'm gonna go back. Here, so this is roughly 1900, okay? And until then, it's reasonably stable, the number of breweries is a bit going up and down, but it's really from 1900 until 1980, we have a total collapse of the number of breweries. This is World War I, this is World War II, but really of course there's upheaval, but they don't really change the trend which is going on. It's a massive consolidation taking place. And this is not true in Belgium, it's true in other countries. These are data from the US and the United Kingdom, and you see the trends are the same everywhere. Then what's happening, this is all domestic consolidation within a country. What you see is that after 1980, this starts happening on a global scale. This is the global beer market structure in 2000. This is very recently, this is only 15 years ago. And so what you see is that there's a lot of big breweries, but they're on the global scale, there's still a lot. Okay? Then what's happening 5 years later only, we're left with 7. And you see here, this is Interbrew. This is where you were yesterday. That now moves into InBev. Consolidation with a number of brews, and particularly with Ambev, Labatt's, and Interbrew. And then another 5 years later, we're left with 4. This is 2010. And so the big discussion right now in the market is whether these two are going to go together, yes or no. So if you believe that they do or they don't, you can buy stock on the market going one way or the other one right now. Now, so what happens then is what I call the counter-revolution of the 21st century. It's the growth of the micro and the craft breweries. So this is data from 4 different countries. So this is Belgium, the US, Czech Republic, and even Italy. This is not something what we normally think of as a beer drinking country, but it increasingly is. And so this is 1990 here. And so the red lines here, that's the number of starting breweries. The blue ones are the ones going out of the market. So you see there's a lot of things going on. A lot of companies starting up, a lot of going out of business, but this is the net effect. And so this is the trend we saw before, coming down, down, down till 1980, fairly flat until 1990, and then it's going up. You see the same trend in all the other countries. USA started roughly 10 years earlier than Belgium and the European ones. And so my hypothesis is because the consolidation, the extreme consolidation in the US from the traditionals, the Budweiser, etc., also happened 10 to 15 years earlier. So the revolution, the anti-movement, if you want, from the craft brewer therefore started earlier in the US than in the European countries. Okay, let's do a quiz. So, who is who? This is 3 data. So this is the share of beer in total alcohol consumption going from 0 to 100. And so this is 80% and this is 5%, 8%, whatever. So with these 3 countries, you probably know roughly where Spain is, right? So this is 1961. So this is Spain, Belgium, and the UK. Okay, now let's move fast forward 50 years. We're in 2011. Now look at the number, the thing. So this is 50%, so nobody's here anymore. Okay? And this is 30%. So they're all kind of similar now. So who is who? This is the UK. This is Belgium. And this is Spain. Okay? Now are these exceptional countries? It turns out not. This is what happened over time. So this is the same period from 1960 till now, roughly. These are the traditional beer drinking countries, and these are what we call, normally think of wine drinking countries, Spain, Italy, and Argentina. And so there's no difference anymore, roughly. They all converged. And so what's going on? Well, essentially this beer consumption has fallen, and it has fallen a lot in traditional beer drinking countries. It's going up, and these are emerging markets, but if I put Argentina and Italy and Spain here, they look similar. This is, for Belgium, for example, the fall is extreme. This is 1975. So since 1975, this is per capita consumption. Beer consumption has gone down, and has gone down by, so they were at 140, we're now somewhere, and so these data can be updated, they're here now, around 70. So it's 50% decline. It's a huge decline. And this is true for Germany, the UK, the United States, and all these countries. This is China, Brazil, and Russia, right here. Oh, sorry, I didn't put the names up there, but they were there, right? So if you look at the global markets then, so in 1983, this is an important year, the Chinese market, beer market, became bigger than the Belgian beer market, okay? And then it went on, 2003, that became bigger than the US beer market. You see that the Belgian one, you can't see it very well, went down. This is the German one, which went down. The reason why the US keeps going up is migration. So the number of people increases in the United States because migration, but actually per capita is going down like in the other countries here as well. So this is the Chinese market, Russia. Then my next to last point is about trade. You see that trade has gone up a lot in the recent years. This is 1990, and you really see that the trend has been going up. There's kind of an increase here in the trend. The trend kind of becomes almost exponential. And so whether you do it in value or in volume, it's about the same. And this is the Belgian data. So we always think about Belgium as a major global beer exporter, but it's a fairly recent phenomenon. Until 1980, we really didn't export very much. Okay, it's really since 1980 that this thing has picked up. This is 1980. This is total production. This is the export, and that's the consumption. And so this line goes down. That's the decline in domestic consumption that we have shown already. And the gap here, the blue box, if you want, the blue area, that's the increase in exports. And so we export now roughly 65% of our beer. And so where is it going? Until 2003, it really meant mostly to the neighbors, to France, Holland, and Germany. Since then, there was more extra EU export growing to the United States. If you travel around the US now, you can get Belgian beer almost anywhere. But since 2009, this has stabilized a bit. There's not that much growth anymore going to the US, and most of it is going into Asia. This is data from China, China's beer imports. You see it's a bit volatile, but since 2005 they really picked up. And where does it come from? This is the big picture, and you see it's mostly German exports, actually. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble breathing here. It's mostly German exports, that's the red line, important to China. The Dutch beer actually has fallen. I presume this is Heineken, I don't know for sure. And so Belgium is somewhere here, but then if we do enlarge this group here, and this is what you see now on the big picture, and you see Belgium is much smaller than Germany, but it's actually increasing quite a lot since 2006, 2007 in terms of exports to China. So this is my last point. I just throw this in because we actually just published this. We normally think about how Belgian beer is a big thing in the world. So we wrote a small paper, it's kind of a spin-off paper, where we actually argue that beer actually created Belgium just as much as Belgium created beer. And so the point here is that this is the Low Countries, Holland and Belgium. And so they were the same country until 1684. And so the border between these two countries today is identical to or almost identical to the border in 1648. And the 1648 border was determined by the outcome of the Treaty of Munster. And so this was the result of an 80-year war between Holland and the Spanish Empire. Holland was part of the Spanish Empire. And basically what happened was that the border here, there's no rivers, there is no mountains, there's no cultural differences, not even religious difference. So it's really weird why this border is there. And so the result is essentially where the armies of the Dutch and this is a Spanish Empire here, got stuck. Okay, now why did they get stuck there? And so we argue the reason is money, it's finance, it's taxation again. And so this is where the Spanish army got their money from. So you see in the beginning, they were much richer than the Dutch. So this is from 1580 till 1650. Okay, and so this is Spanish army expenditure and this is Dutch army expenditure. So the Spanish were totally outspending the Dutch initially, but gradually the Dutch equalized after 40 years, and then basically they raised much more money for their armies than the Spanish were doing. So we're totally transformed. And where did the money come from? This is with the Spanish, so they got their money from essentially importing silver from Latin America. And where did the Dutch got their money from? Beer taxes. Okay, so you see this is the money coming from beer taxes over this 80-year period. And this is basically what created the border between Belgium and Holland today. So this is a conclusion of that particular story. So be careful. Okay, I'll end with this. This is our organization. It's free membership, so anybody who would be interested, just sign up at the website. And if we organize something, we have new publications, we'll send an email to you, or you can download it. Thank you very much.
I have a comment about your data of volume beer consumption and time. It's correct, of course, there is a degrees of those volume consumption, but when you express it of consumption of volume alcohol, you will see something else. Because, let's say, 30, 50 years ago, people consumed most dinner beer, later on it was lager beers, and now, as you know, it is stronger beers. What's your comment on that?
No, you're right. Well, the problem is, okay, you can't get any data on that. We've tried to find that, and we've tried to split this up because, I mean, I know when I was young, and that was the time roughly when there was a peak, okay, we had a lot of table beer, which, I mean, the children drank. And so that has gone down a lot with people drink more water and Coca-Cola and whatever. But we try to get data, and we can't get the data. So I'm sure that the trends are exaggerated, okay? The other thing which we try to get data on is on value, because the beer now is much more expensive that we usually consume. We have like 1 triple or 2 triples, and people used to consume a couple of pints of regular beer, and we can't get data on the value neither. Okay, so it's absolutely true, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question as well. I think as beer lovers, we're all excited, I hope, about the emergence of the smaller breweries again. But But what's your idea about the future trend? Because it looks like the bigger holdings are multinationals are now also expanding their portfolio of smaller, beers. So will they outcompete the small ones again, or do you think it will stabilize?
It's a very good question, and I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. You can you can see different things. What's for sure is that all the major global players or the big breweries, they all have now a portfolio of different types of beer, okay, which they didn't have in the past or not in that way in any. So that's nothing new. The extent to which the small will keep their market share, I think a big issue is that is also a matter of definition. For example, in the US, I lived in the US from 88 till 92, and the thing was kind of happening, but in most places you couldn't get any craft beer yet at that particular time. Now the biggest American brewery is basically Samuel Adams. It's the Boston Brewing Company. So that started off as a craft beer, but is this still a craft beer? I mean, this is like now same thing with Sierra Nevada, for example. They just opened another plant on the other side of the US. So some of these crafts have actually become quite big. And so the issue is a bit, some of the crafts are no longer crafts, and some of the big ones are now having this big thing. So I think it's going to be a much more diverse market or business structure, if you want.